In high school, the desire to fit in with the popular crowd can feel like a gravitational pull, tugging you into situations you might not otherwise consider. For me, it led to one of the most embarrassing and humbling moments of my teenage years, a lesson I would carry for the rest of my life. I was never the most popular kid, nor was I an outcast. I hovered in that nebulous middle ground, which often left me yearning for more attention, more inclusion, more of that inexplicable glow that surrounded the cool kids. Their effortless charisma seemed unattainable, yet I was determined to bridge the gap. It all started during gym class. Our coach had decided it was too nice a day to stay indoors, so we were sent outside to the basketball courts. A few of the cooler kids had brought their skateboards, casually leaning against the bleachers as they flipped and twisted their boards with the kind of skill that made it look easy. The sound of wheels clattering against pavement, punctuated by bursts of laughter, was magnetic. I found myself gravitating toward them, trying to catch snippets of their conversations and mimic their relaxed posture. I had never stepped on a skateboard in my life. My childhood was filled with bikes and rollerblades, but skateboarding? It had always seemed like an elusive, dangerous art form. Yet, watching them glide and ollie, I couldn't help but think, how hard could it be? One of the boys, Ryan, noticed me watching. He was one of those effortlessly cool types, always with a smirk, always confident. He waved me over. I felt the pressure of their eyes, their expectation. In that moment, I knew I couldn't back down. Inside, I was a mix of nerves and excitement. Here was my chance to prove myself, to be part of their world, even if only for a few minutes. The board felt alien under my feet. Wobbly, unsteady, like trying to balance on a bar of soap. I pushed off, tentatively at first, and managed to roll a few feet. My heart swelled with a brief burst of pride. Maybe I could do this after all. But then, emboldened by their cheers and my fleeting success, I decided to try a trick. A kickflip. I had seen it countless times on YouTube. How hard could it really be? I crouched slightly, preparing to jump, and then, disaster. The board shot out from under me like a rogue missile, and I came crashing down onto the unforgiving pavement. The pain was immediate and sharp. My knees and elbows bore the brunt of the fall, scraping against the rough ground. But worse than the physical pain was the sound of laughter. It wasn't cruel exactly, but it was loud and unrelenting. I lay there for a moment, wishing the earth would swallow me whole. As I got up, brushing gravel from my skin and trying to play it off, I realized something important. The harder I tried to impress them, the more ridiculous I looked. My attempt to fit in had backfired spectacularly. Instead of earning their respect, I had become the punchline of their jokes. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I avoided eye contact, keeping my head down and my sleeves pulled over my scraped elbows. When I got home, I inspected the damage in the bathroom mirror. The scrapes were ugly but superficial. What lingered was the sting of humiliation. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the incident in my mind. Why had I felt the need to prove myself? What was I hoping to gain? I thought about the popular kids, how they seemed so at ease in their own skin. But was that true? Or was I projecting my insecurities onto them, imagining a confidence they might not even feel? In the days that followed, I began to notice things I hadn't before. The popular kids, for all their charm, weren't immune to the same pressures I felt. Ryan, the boy who had lent me his skateboard, was often the loudest in the group, always cracking jokes and performing stunts. But I started to wonder if his antics were less about confidence and more about maintaining his status. Another girl, Lindsay, always seemed to be smiling, but her laughter sometimes felt forced, like she was trying too hard to keep up appearances. Slowly, I began to understand that the pedestal I had placed them on wasn't real. They were just as human, just as flawed as the rest of us. This realization didn't erase my embarrassment, but it softened it. I started to see that my need to impress them was less about them and more about me, about my own insecurities and my fear of being invisible. The fall didn't make me an overnight philosopher, but it planted a seed. I began to question the choices I made and the reasons behind them. Did I genuinely enjoy the things I pursued, or was I chasing approval? It was a slow process, but over time, I started to prioritize authenticity over appearances. That's not to say I completely abandoned the desire to fit in. It's a natural human instinct, after all. But I became more mindful of how I went about it. I started to focus on finding people who shared my interests rather than trying to mold myself to fit someone else's idea of cool. I joined the school's art club, rediscovering a passion for drawing that I had set aside in my quest for popularity. I spent more time with friends who accepted me as I was, scrapes and all. Years later, when I look back on that moment in gym class, I'm grateful for it. It was a painful lesson, both physically and emotionally, but it taught me something invaluable: the importance of authenticity. Trying to be someone you're not is exhausting, and it rarely works. True confidence comes from embracing who you are, flaws and all. Now, when I see teenagers struggling to find their place, I want to tell them what I've learned. It's okay to want to fit in, but don't lose yourself in the process. The right people will accept you for who you are, not for who you pretend to be. And if you ever find yourself on a skateboard for the first time, maybe start with a helmet and some knee pads.